Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on kickstarting your 2018 school year. My name is Dwayne. I'm one of the technical account managers here at Alaris, and I'll be taking you through some of the common questions we get at this time of year. I also have sitting in the room here with me is Josh, one of our support technicians. He's going to be answering some of your questions as we go along. So if you do want to ask any questions, head down to the questions in the menu and type, and he will try his best to answer. Today, what we're going to focus on are a few key areas of Schoolbox to assist you getting started for your teachers coming back on site, as well as your students in a couple of weeks' time. This session will be recorded, so if you do need to access it in the future, you certainly can. One thing to be aware of as you start getting to the start of the new year is making sure your key stakeholders are aware of what's taking place. So from the perspective of making sure your IT team is understanding of what technical aspects need to be updated. So that's the configuration of your timetable, possibly the importing of the data and the creation of the folders. You also want to make sure that you've got your timetabler on board. They're normally very helpful at getting you the class codes, which is what you need to be able to perform the rollover, as well as your e-learning coordinator. These people can be helpful in getting your folder structure correct before you get started. So what I'm going to do is start showing you a demo instance of Schoolbox, and I'm going to go through the first part of this webinar, which is on rollover. Now, the rollover process is something that a lot of people ask questions about, they get confused about. So I thought I would step through this process in a nice structured way. If need be, you can watch the recording again and go back over it if you would like. So in my instance here of Schoolbox, you will see under my resource browser that I still have current my 2017 classes. Now, the way that I know that they're current is you can see next to the class code a rounded bracket. When there's a rounded bracket next to the class code, this is signifying that this class is active within the system. So what we're going to do as part of this rollover is we're going to archive these classes. What you'll also notice is I have gone through and started setting up the structure for my 2018 classes. It's helpful. Sometimes you may replicate what you've done in the past, but it's also a good opportunity to look at your structure that you had last time around and possibly make any changes that you need to. So to archive my existing classes, I'm going to head to the administration area of Schoolbox. I'm going to head to Rollover. I'm going to click on the folder that I would like to roll over. What you will find is this will identify any classes that are found within that folder, and then it will allow you to roll over. One thing you'll notice on this page is there's a couple of places where it says that this is irreversible. If you go through this process of rollover, it cannot be reverted. So be very careful with what you do and make sure it's at the right time to suit your school's needs. So for me, I'm going to click on 2017 classes because these are the classes that have ended and I'd like to recreate. And I'm going to click on rollover. What this has now done is if we go back to our resource browser, this has now changed those circle brackets into square brackets, signifying that the class is now archived and removing that association that it had with the sys. So this is now no longer associated with the sys. The next stage of adding classes is we need to import the classes into Schoolbox. So in my administration area, the part that we are referring to is under folder, and this is our bulk add folder template. To download the template, you can click download template, and this is going to give you a blank document to help you in setting up your folder structure. Now, I have pre-prepared one here so I can go through the details that we need to add to make sure that our information is correct. So bear with me, I'll just bring this across. When you're doing this process, there's a few different ways in which you can manage your folders. you can go about making sure that you have a single folder for your 2018 classes, or you can set up a multiple folder structure. The import template has a couple of relevant pieces. One is the parent ID, second folder name, and third is this folder code region. The folder name, this is normally what people use as the class description. Folder code is the class code within your SIS. The parent ID is the folder in which you would like those class pages created. So this is where, when we go through and bulk create these pages, it's going to be located. As I mentioned before, some people would like to set up their structure so it's not just one folder for 2018 classes, but they may separate it into multiple folders. There are two ways in which we can go about doing this. The first way is we can use a single file and update the parent ID to be the folder we want. The other way we can do this is we could create a CSV for each of the subfolders that I would like. This is probably easier if you need to create 150 pages for the senior campus of your school. One question we often get is, how do I know what the parent ID is? To find the parent ID, we need to know what folder we're going to put it in. So I'm going to look at the demo classes folder. There's two ways we can see it. On hover on the page in the bottom left-hand corner of your browser will be the folder code. If not, when we click on modify, we will see the parent ID or the folder code in this URL. So for this folder, which is demo classes, it has a folder ID of 267. In my CSV, I go back in. My combined class has a parent ID of 267, which is where that folder will be created. One thing we get asked a bit is, what if I have multiple classes wanting to use the same class page? What you'll notice here is I've actually been able to add a Synergetic code or a sys code for the 3 classes against one class page. This means when I create that class, all 3 of those classes will be enrolled. So this CSV, as you can see, has parent ID, the folder name or the class description, and the folder code. And this is matching, obviously, what is in your SIS. What I'm then going to do is go back into my administration area and go to this bulk add folders location. I'm going to import my CSV. I'm going to upload that document. Now I'm going to look at my permissions and my homepage template. One thing to be careful of is this inherent permissions from parent folder. When you're doing bulk adding of folders, do not click on that inherent permissions. One of the reasons for this is that will remove that sys code against the class page, meaning that you lose the association of teacher and student from that page, which is the aim of this style of importing of data. One thing that a lot of schools do is when they are creating class pages, they will give all teachers either read access or write access, depending on the policy of the school. Obviously, as part of this, we're going to be creating class pages. We run different templates for different class pages if we're doing junior and senior school. This time around, I'm just going to use my secondary class template for all of the pages that I create. So I've got my template containing all the information. I've made sure my permissions are set from that generic level, and I'm going to click on import. We can see here that this has now created those folders. So we have the 6 folders created. They've been added and they have been added okay. The simplest way for us to check this information is to head into our resource browser and see if our class information is correct. So we can see here under demo classes, I have my combined class of demo 1, 2, and 3. If I go into that page, I'll see here that my class list has pulled through. So that is the way in which we handle the importing of this information. As you can see, when I did that import, I have actually added them into their particular subfolders because I was only adding about 6 pages. So that is the rollover process. First step is obviously to click rollover on the desired folder. Second one is to set up your folder structure. And the third is to import your folders. So moving forward, the next aspect of the system that we get a lot of questions about is if you're a school that isn't running one of the SISs that we integrate with, people often wonder how they set up their timetable structure using our Schoolbox connector. So when we're looking at the importing of the data for our Schoolbox connector, we need to make sure we do things correctly at the start of the year. Firstly, we want to make sure that our user data is correct. Once our user data is correct, we're then going to look at the importing of our timetable structure, our timetable, and enrollment. So as we move through these, we work our way from left to right. So we've got our users up to date, we add our timetable structure, timetable, and enrollment. If things change and we need to look at enrollment data down the track, what we do is we look at going back to the previous items. So if we need to re-enroll a new student, we would add the student under users, and then we would run the enrollment CSV. If we have to change our timetable structure, then we have to make sure we work through timetable structure, timetable, and enrollment. So working our way from left to right. That's the nutshell in regards to the Schoolbox connector. When you're importing, always making sure you're working left to right, depending on where you're at in that process, stepping back and following across if you make a change to start off with. The next aspect of the system is if in your SIS, the timetable code gets updated. So it may be that your 2018 timetable has a different timetable code, or you may split your timetable for different campuses. We need to be able to associate that timetable. The way in which we do this is we go into lists and into campus. And next to the campus is we see the external timetable code. The external timetable code is what matches your SIS integration, making sure that the information is correct and something in which we can use. If you have multiple timetables, then you would have multiple different timetable codes. You may have different timetable days. So if you run a 10-day timetable in your junior campus, you would update that within this system as well. Making sure we click save. So that's obviously a helpful thing to check to make sure that your timetable data is going to be correct and communicating with your SIS. Now, obviously, as we're going through and creating these class pages and we've got that timetable communicating properly, one thing we may not want is our students to have access to their timetable until later on in January or when they come on site. One way in which you can manage this is you can use a tool which is called hide timetable from user profile. So if I go to bulk modify, I choose my senior campus and I'm going to look for my senior students. I can go through and change this hide timetable. If this hide timetable is enabled, this will not show the timetable to the student. Now, in a lot of schools, we've found that they don't want the student to have access to the timetable until it's been confirmed, so maybe 1 or 2 days before the start of term. You can use the bulk modify of the user to change that value. You can also use the user import CSV, and you can also use the UPS to manage that. So those 3 different ways to manage if the timetable is shown or not shown. So far what we've looked at is we've looked at how to set up our rollover structure and set up our folder structure for the new year. If you're in a school that uses a Schoolbox connector, we've looked at how to set up our timetable structure our timetable, and our enrollment. We've had a look at how to change our timetable code if that data has changed in your school or in your SIS. We've also now just shown how to look at hiding the timetable for a user. The next thing to discuss is around what we call term dates in Schoolbox. Now, we get a lot of questions about term dates. People often get confused. What these are is these act as a way of filtering and defining the start and end of a term, and this affects a few different areas of Schoolbox. It affects your classes and your assessments and the time period in which they're associated. It affects the filtering of your grades page. It affects the analytics of Schoolbox and the analytics area. So it's used as a filter and a collection within the system. The second thing it's able to do is you're able to archive a particular term. By archiving a term, what this does is this stops a user from being able to update the marks against their assessment tasks. So some of our schools use this. They will go through in semester one, get all their staff to complete the assessment items. Once semester one is over, they go through archive, meaning they can no longer go back and make changes to that information. Schools find this very, very helpful to obviously keep their records secure and make sure that they've got continuity of information along the time. To set these dates, it's a matter of clicking Add Term, adding a title. So we are now semester 1, 2018. The code, this could match what we're using in the system. For us, I'm just going to do 2018-1. The start date. Now, start date is obviously a relevant thing. Assessment items that are falling outside of that will not be visible within those terms. So I'm going to choose the 22nd of January through till the 28th of February. And I'm going to create that term. So now any assessment item that is being created within that term will be found within those filters. As I said, the term dates will apply to the assessments, will apply to the grade page, markbook, class analytics, and the My Classes area. This also now has an impact on the resource booking. So you can set the system so that the resource booking does not allow resources to be booked in a future term, meaning that you can keep your timetable consistent and making sure that the information is correct. The next thing that we thought would be helpful is looking at how to, if you're a Synergetic-based school, we get a lot of people asking, why is my teacher's timetable not showing correctly? Now, within Synergetic, there are 2 file semesters. There is the default file year or file semester, which is defined as a system, and then you also have an individual file semester. This is something that isn't necessarily the same if a teacher has not accessed Synergetic, or they haven't manually changed that information, or they've gone back in and changed to a different file semester. You can actually check this information by going into Users. If I find a particular user that I am concerned about, so I'm going to find Rebecca White, who is a teacher, and I click Modify. Underneath the user's information, I will see the Synergetic info. This tells me what year they are in and what semester they are in. So if you find that a teacher has attendance going into the wrong location in Synergetic, this is one location to go look. 2, if you are wondering whether the teacher has updated, they're saying they can't see their current classes, this is a really helpful piece of information to check out. One thing to be aware of is, as IT administrators, you can update that information. So in Schoolbox Help, we do have a frequently asked question. If you have a DBA within the system, they can go through and run this query, and it will automatically go through and update the file year and file semester to what is required for you as a school. So if you do need assistance with getting your staff in the right file semester, the information is available on Schoolbox Help. One that's popped up this year due to whether it be upgrades of the SIS or changes in network infrastructure over the holidays is we have found that some of the permissions haven't necessarily been right between the SIS and Schoolbox. So a helpful little tool to help you as a school to make sure that A, we have the required permissions to get your system up and running and to get the information is to head to the administration area and home. Click on your SIS name. So this example is Synergetic, and this will go through and perform a health check. The health check will tell us, do we have the required permissions for the system? So we can see here for Synergetic, there are no errors detected and that we have all of the required permissions to be running the year. As I mentioned, we have found over the last few days, whether it be updates to the system or to the SIS, that there are some changes and sometimes there is information that isn't shown. So that's everything that I wanted to cover off today in this presentation, just to show you a few things that we've found as common failures. Now, I know that there's obviously some questions that are running in the forum. So if there's anything in particular you would like me to show in the remaining few minutes, please send through those questions and I'll try and see what we can do. So one thing that might be helpful, I'm just having a look at some of the threads that are running here, is when you are creating those folders and the bulk folder upload, one thing to be aware of is if you do set your teachers to be read access in this global permissions, but when you import your folder structure, so the teacher would be the teacher of that class, the SIS code is going to give them write permission to the page. So what this means is if they have a link to their SIS saying that they're the teacher of that class, they will be given write access to the page. The students would be given read access to the page. So the way our permission structure works is we will always honor the highest permission. So the highest permission when you're using SIS codes is a permission from the SIS, would override the read. But if you gave all teachers write access, then all teachers would have write access to that page. One of the questions here is in regards to the Synergetic semester is already set to semester 1 2018, and you can see this in the settings under users. Do you also need to change the semesters in Schoolbox? The semesters in Schoolbox, or those term dates, are actually isolated from your SIS. So these term dates are unique to Schoolbox, and they're just used for the filtering of information within Schoolbox itself. So at the moment, it doesn't have any links back into your SIS. So I hope that answers your question, Luke. I'm just having a look. It looks like Josh is grabbing that one. So we've got a couple more minutes to answer any urgent questions that are coming through. I can see Josh is answering one for Jenny at the moment. All right, so while Josh is answering in the questions area, I might just do it with my voice as well. So the question was, if some of my Year 11 teachers want to continue using their Year 11 pages from 2017, how can I do this? So if you do want to reuse your pages, and whether it be that the code hasn't changed from year to year, what you want to make sure is that you don't perform the rollover on those pages. So by performing the rollover, you're going to strip out the code. So you want to make sure that that is not going to be the case. So they could be isolated in a different folder. If there's an update to the class code and they want to use that page and they want to move it across, you can go in and manually add the Synergetic ID to that page. So I'll go and do that now. So on my combined class, if I click on modify, down the bottom here, I can see the Synergetic subject codes. I'm also going to add 9A English. So if you want to update that information, you can go through and do that as well. Okay. So I've got time for one more question. So how can we hide calendar events, classes from Synergetic, from students only before a specific date? So this is that hide timetable from user. So you can do this through a couple of ways. One is via the bulk modify, one via the CSV import, or through the UPS. On that date, you will need to go through and reverse the change that you have done. It's not possible to get the system to automatically recognize the date in which you want to do that, but you can go perform that same bulk modify, change your UPS rules, or do a new import and deselect that hide timetable area. All right. So I know that Josh is just finishing off a couple of the last questions from his perspective. From my perspective, I'd like to thank you very much for listening today. Hopefully this has answered some of the questions that have arisen, in your time this year, starting the new year off, or in previous years. This is kind of just a culmination of things that we see as common problems, and our hope is to just kind of address them now so we can help you guys get a great start to the year. So I would like to thank you. If there's any questions that Josh isn't able to answer now, we will go through and get them answered outside of here as well. So thank you very much for your time this morning. We'll leave this presentation open for a little bit just so we can answer those questions off. Thank you.